Hello and welcome to Informed Dissent. I'm Lauren Leggieri, and this is your news of the week for the week of March 14th, 2026. San Jose State is suing the federal government so that they can continue to allow male athletes to compete against women, and as a result, may possibly lose $300 million in federal funding. The Supreme Court has revisited Foot v. Ludbow 8 times. A case about whether schools can secretly socially transition children without telling their parents. Justice Kagan says the court should take it. At the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, the UN's premier women's rights body, the US proposed defining gender based on biological sex. The vote failed 37-1. When the result was announced, the room broke into a standing ovation. 6 countries abstained: Côte d'Ivoire, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Egypt, Mali, Mauritania, and Saudi Arabia. We're really keeping great company on this one. The Commission will now spend 10 days working on women's access to justice and protections from sex-based violence without an agreed definition of the word woman. New York Attorney General Letitia James ordered NYU Langone to resume hormones and puberty blockers for minors by March 11th. The deadline has passed. The hospital has said nothing. And a UC Riverside gender studies professor is calling for the words gay and lesbian to be abolished in the name of inclusion. Wow. For a full breakdown of everything you just heard, head to the LGBT Courage Coalition Substack. We have this full news for paid subscribers in much more detail. Today on the show, Jamie, Cori, and I are digging into 2 stories: the latest paper from the Dutch clinic, the originators of the gender-affirming care model, and what it actually shows, and a man who identifies as non-binary who recently went viral for his take on gay and lesbian identity, has been sitting on a 7-figure federal grant to study non-binary identity. We'll get to both. Now on to the show.
I know. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Informed Dissent. This week for Saturday, March the 14th, I have something to admit right off the bat, which is that I was ill prepared that the children are home from school today. I thought spring break was only a week and started on Monday. So if anyone runs away from the screen quickly, it's because we have to go help the babysitter.
Wait, they start spring break on a Friday?
Just for
Yeah.
shits and giggles. Yeah, they like to really throw a wrench in your life.
I feel like this is something that teachers union came up with.
I don't even know why we have spring break. What is it for elementary school?
To take a break.
Is it even?
I have a feeling it was I don't know for sure, but I have a feeling that historically it's probably connected with religious observations that the vast majority of the population
Well, it used to be,
shared
but
at one point.
Easter is it's like 3 weeks away.
Yeah, I'm not talking about 2026. I'm talking about historically how there was a spring break.
Yeah.
Well,
But what do I know?
They don't need a break. They go in, they have 18 snacks, they learn a few numbers, they play recess, and they come home. They don't need a
Wow.
break from that.
Wow.
they do have 18 snacks. Okay, I want to tell you both a story this week. Can I share this story? I know that it's news because this research paper came out this week, but I really want to tell you all about it.
I'm
Yes, and
dying to know about it.
Okay.
it's by De Vries, who often flies under the radar for the weight of her responsibility for actually starting this. So let's see what
Well,
she's up to.
okay, it's Anna de Vries, but also Thomas Steensma is also an author on this. I'll just share.
Who are those people?
Okay,
Briefly,
well,
very briefly. Why do they matter? Because
they
they're
are
the
they are the Dutch.
progenitors.
They
The
are the
Dutch.
Dutch. Yes. And they started the protocol. I say that in quotes because there's a New York Times podcast called that. And well, let me tell you the story. I think it'll explain a little bit.
That's fine.
So this research paper dropped on this week on March the 9th, and it is titled Characteristics of Dutch Gender Clinic Referred Adolescents Who Did Not Pursue Gender Affirming Medical Treatment. Making sense so far? Who this
Who
paper
did not?
who did not proceed. Okay. So on its face, this paper looks exactly like the kind of clinical research that you want. So you want a large cohort. It's a 10-year window. This was supposed to be an honest look at the kids who didn't get medical treatment, who they were, why they didn't proceed, like what happened. So I read research papers with a bunch of different color highlighters when I read through, and I write a whole bunch of notes in the margins. I'm always kind of asking research paper questions as I go. And anyway, we'll get to the one line that made me drop everything. Okay, so this paper is coming from the Center of Expertise on Gender Dysphoria in Amsterdam. And if you know that name, it's because they came up with the Dutch protocol. Annelou de Vries, one of this paper's co-authors, is one of the architects of the Dutch protocol. And so is Thomas Steensma, who came after her a little bit. So this study was given IRB ethics approval because what they did is a chart review. So they claim that this paper was written not by doing any tests on human subjects, that they wrote the paper because all they did is they went back to review every single chart from 2009 to 2019. So that's the 10-year time frame. 09, 19. They pulled 1,470 kids, and the question they asked was, why did these kids not go on medical treatment? And basically kind of like what happened to them. So of the 1,470, 264 adolescents did not pursue treatment. So this is 18% did not move forward, which means on the flip side, 82% of the kids that showed up in their clinic went on to receive a puberty blocker and or cross-sex hormones. So that's our first stat, is that 82% of the kids coming to them get the green light and move on to treatment. And you two should interrupt me at any time if you want. No, okay. So there is 18% who are I'm going to call them the non-pursuers, because they weren't necessarily like, they're not like being told, no, go away. They're also kind of just being told, come back again. They're the non-pursuers. Of the non-pursuers, the authors are saying that 38% of the non-pursuers simply did not meet diagnostic criteria for gender dysphoria. So they came in with gender-related questions, went through at least one visit for assessment, and the conclusion was, right now you don't meet criteria, you don't meet the diagnosis. We're not going to give you the green light right away. The second largest group of the non-pursuers did have gender dysphoria feelings, but the diagnostic process stalls out because of what the paper calls problems in broader identity development or psychological functioning. So what they're finding in this paper is that the kids who don't pursue treatment in the Dutch clinic had higher, and remember, this time frame of 2009 to 19, they had higher rates of psychological problems than the kids who didn't. More of them were in the clinical range for emotional and behavioral difficulties. And it looks like the kids carrying the most psychiatric complexity were the least likely to proceed. And it's not clear that it was because the clinic was like being protective of them and saying you're too mentally ill to move on. Um, because they're vague in the paper. They're basically saying they did first visit, but weren't like coming back or didn't take part in the next steps. The paper is really quick to point out that about 30% of these non-pursuing adolescents pop back up as adults. And they reapply and re-ask for treatment. And the authors think that this is really important and like really meaningful, that the adolescent time wasn't right, but that they still truly were trans and they just needed a little bit more time for their gender identity to become clearer. But my takeaway is that roughly 70, what? Go ahead.
So these people needed puberty for their identity to become clearer? Because these are the kids that weren't blocked. Is that what they're saying?
Yes. So these are kids who show up in the Dutch clinic as adolescents, are sort of screened out after like this one visit, but they found it really profound that that 30% show back up as adults.
Is it profound?
I,
I'm just wondering.
I found this interesting because the thing that I took away from this 30% group is that I was thinking about parents who have trans-identified adolescents who are trying to work with them and trying to work with them and are just waiting for that age 18 and know, even if they might not be pursuant as an adolescent, that some of them are still just going to, in the US, show up at the Planned Parenthood the day they turn 18.
Right.
I think it's interesting that about 70% of the non-pursuers who did not pursue as teens also do not show up as adults. And the authors don't say that that means that their dysphoria resolved, but they also don't really dive into it either. And that I think that 70% matters because this clinical consensus has kind of said that adolescent gender dysphoria is fixed if it persists in past puberty. And so they're basically saying we had these teens post puberty who showed up with gender dysphoria, and then they basically are somehow turned away, but then they don't show back up as adults. Okay. Are you with me so far? Okay. Um, so you know how research papers, you might not know this, they're laid out in there's a certain format. So you write the abstract, which is the short like paragraph that explains your paper. Then you have the introduction. Then you're supposed to do your methodology section, your demographic, your measures, your statistical analysis. You can then go into all of your tables and all of your data. And then you're supposed to say, these were the limitations of our study. These are our conclusions. This is what you should take away. I realize both of you maybe don't write a lot of clinical research papers, but
Yeah, I just want to get this straight. So the general argument is that quote unquote, trans kids need puberty blockers so they can have time to think about whether they're trans, except for the trans kids who don't need puberty blockers, who need puberty to go through puberty, um, so that they can become adults and decide that they're trans. Am I following all the logic thus far? Because just trying to keep up here.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay. So then I want to bring you to the demographic section. So a demographic section in a research paper should not be where your jaw hits the floor.
Hmm.
It should be where they're basically saying, this is how many people we had, and this is kind of the characteristics of their demographics. Should not be the like, what the hell did they just write? So I'm reading this paper, and I'm in the demographics section, and I read this sentence. I'm going to read it to the both of you. Um, so De Vries and Steensma, they use this phrase GAMT, gender affirming medical treatment. They've deemed it GAMAT. Gender affirming medical treatment was started in 6 adolescents who had not yet received a gender dysphoria diagnosis.
Oh, we don't even have to be trans anymore. Great. Keep
I
going.
feel like you just killed the sentence. I'm going to start it again.
All right.
Gender affirming medical treatment was started in 6 adolescents who had not yet received a gender dysphoria diagnosis with the purpose of creating headspace for further exploration in their diagnostic trajectory.
Okay, let me sum this up. So quote unquote, trans kids who aren't trans need puberty blockers to think about whether they're going to be trans too. Okay, great. This sounds great.
Time to wait.
Yeah.
But they don't clarify if this is a I don't think this is a puberty blocker because so yes, Lauren. So 6 children are receiving interventions before they're diagnosed at the clinic that created the diagnostic standard.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Gets better. Every paper gets better.
So I think what they're trying to say here is the justification is that puberty itself was creating so much distress that they couldn't even do an assessment. So the solution in the actual clinic was to start the medical intervention and then complete the assessment afterwards. I
Wow.
I also like that they used the word headspace.
I mean, by their logic, every kid should be put on puberty blockers except the ones who shouldn't, so that they can grow up and learn that they're trans too. What?
Okay, here's the other thing about
How does this make sense?
the sentence in this paper, though, that this appears in the demographics table. It's not written about in the limitations in the conclusion section. It's not flagged or said, oh, we need to point out that we deviated completely from our own protocol here. They don't acknowledge this at all in any way. Um, we don't know if this is an edge case or like who who decided these 6 kids. Like they give us nothing about these 6 kids or what they don't even go on further to explain like what happened when they're given this headspace. Like do they stay in the group that stay they don't give us anything.
So another thorough and methodologically sound study from the people who invented this retarded idea in the first
No,
place.
well,
Great.
so what's interesting is I don't think this is out of malice because I don't even think that they saw this because they're so invested in their own in their own like framework that they don't like. But the thing that like to me is so shocking about this is that again when we've talked in the past about how trans and gender is like the special unicorn. Please explain to me what other research paper would write a paper and say we had 1,400 patients. Oh, and by the way, we treated six of them for hemophilia, but we didn't even know if they had it. We treated six for, like name any other condition. We didn't know if they had it, but we just wanted to create some headspace in case they came up with that they had it. Like,
Sounds really scientifically sound. I'm glad that this is crazy.
That's weird because to me it sounds unethical.
okay, but
Yeah, to
that's,
treat someone with something that you cannot even diagnose them with based on your own criteria that you made up.
the ethics question is so relevant to me because this paper, when we talk about how did this is a study, its own self-contained study. When they went to the IRB or whatever they call it in Amsterdam, they said, we want to do a systematic chart review of every patient that we saw from '09 to 19, and we want to review them for this. The ethics people said, yep, not a problem. Here's your rubber stamp because they don't see the review of these charts as it's not the experiment. What they're getting IRB approval now, the experiment is we just want to review charts. And they're like, oh, yeah, a chart review is nothing. There's no, medical ethics. When you do the chart review, you can't like write up the paper giving away these people's like identifiable health information. But what is astonishing to me is there an ethics violation here for the original study and were those patients initially even in a study? Were all of the patients that came to the Dutch clinic from the initiation on in a proper study where they all consented in? Yeah, it's just it just continues to um the whole thing continues to just be kind of a cluster.
I mean, they just keep building on this false premise. And everything everything they do is underlined by this false assumption that they already have.
Yeah, I mean, I, I would
Like,
love.
either way, they're going to make these kids trans.
What do you mean either way? Like,
Because they're saying the ones that we didn't proceed with came back as adults, so they're trans too, and the ones who did proceed, well, we were right and they were trans. So everybody's just trans. As long as you show up, you're trans.
yes, and the other questions I have kind of in follow-up is does something change from 2019 to 2026? Is the the non-pursuer rate remain consistent? 82% of a diagnostic rate is also just strikes me as really high.
Right. Well,
So
that was another question I had. Like, in terms of like other, I mean, there's nothing to compare it to because it's the only thing where you self-diagnose and self-prescribe.
but I wonder like how many people who
I, I think a lot of psychological things are kind of could elbow into that category, Lauren.
Right, but most of the psychological things don't involve radical physical alterations.
No, they don't involve surgery, but
Yeah.
I suspect there's a lot of people that are taking medications on a daily basis for things that they think that they have.
Yeah.
I think that if we looked at, I think you're probably right, Corey. So those individuals who go to a psychiatrist with the belief that they have depression, clinical depression or anxiety, um, uh, maybe that's in the 80% range. But schizophrenia or borderline or, I mean, those more serious? I,
Don't know.
I don't know.
I'm sorry, I lost track. I have ADHD.
Oh, Corey, I got us some tarot cards.
Oh, awesome.
They're actually they're right here.
The folklore tarot. Oh my gosh, I want to see those.
Yeah,
All right.
she went to a
What
rocks.
were we just talking about?
I don't know, but I went to a magic store and the woman said, if you were feeling that this deck was appropriate for someone,
Jamie
then
just like,
then it is. Yeah, she's like, no, I don't want. So I was like, I was thinking of my friend Corey, and she's like, it's probably
okay,
perfect for him.
okay, this is a good shtick. Let's go back to Jamie. She's in the middle of a thought.
I
Maybe
was
not.
I was in the middle. Where's my video? I was in the middle of
Oh,
I I always thought that people were claiming that gender dysphoria was a rare condition. It was super small numbers. To me, it seemed like a really rare
That's a
condition.
large number. If you're saying this is a very small percentage of the population afflicted with this, but somehow 82% of the people who come in are being medicalized. That's not rare.
No, well, no, I mean, I think your statistics are off there. You're like in a funnel, like the rareness funnel, like if you get to a gender clinic, you've already kind of been part of the funnel that's narrowing down, right? But like how many people who have like chronic, okay, like ru- okay, say the number of people who have joint pain go to a rheumatologist. You're going to have a huge group of people who have joint pain, but those who actually end up diagnosed with, you know, verifiable rheumatoid arthritis, I don't think are going to be 80% of those who have joint pain. I think it's going to be much, much smaller.
could be.
I don't know. Okay.
The
Well,
one
this,
thing, this is not to um, give these researchers credit that they don't deserve, but I think we have to always keep in mind that these fields are art, right? They're not there. There's as much judgment and um, intuition happening as there is decision making by solid scientific evidence. In
yeah.
fact, they're trying to create the scientific record uh, by iterating on their judgment. And that's not just this field, it's a lot of fields. So, um, what we think that what they're doing is terrible, but from their standpoint, they would know that they see that these kids, they're meeting them in person, just like Jamie did at the clinic. They're meeting them in person. They think that they have a possible answer to solve the uh, crisis that they see these children are in, and they feel like they ought to do something about it. They're in the position where they could do something about it. And they're going to try to do something about it. And then, as we see from decades of their publications, they're trying to ensure some level of accountability by reporting their results. Again, this isn't to excuse them, but just something to keep in mind.
I guess on the one, I do appreciate that they are continuing to publish and they are trying to look back and make some kind of record of what they did. Um, but I will just say for kind of my headspace for the news this week. It was a lot of that paper, and then it was a lot of a court decision that came out in West Virginia. But where were you two at? Was there anything that came up for you two this week and what you saw in the news or?
I saw that there was sort of something going around with a researcher, a trans-identified professor, I should say, not a researcher,
Oh
a
God.
professor making a claim that
Mhm.
we should discontinue the uses of the terms gay and lesbian because they are marginalizing for people with trans identities.
Yeah. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about that, or do you want me to?
Well, I mean, I did a little bit more research,
I
background
thought
research on
so.
this guy, and he's uh, a man who identifies as non-binary and has been working in the gender grievance academic field since his uh, fairly recent um, acquisition of a doctorate.
Did you just
And
coin a new term?
what is that?
Gender grievance?
No, that's not a new term.
That's
These,
probably what the guy got his PhD in.
all these identity fields, whether it's race or sex/gender or I don't know, what have you. Those are the two big ones. These are referred to as grievance studies by some critics, including James Lindsay, who we should
Yeah.
invite on sometime.
I love it. It's no LGB without the T, but don't say gay. And being gay and lesbian is offensive to trans people, but no LGB without the T.
Well, that doesn't mean that there's a lot of people who agree with him, but he can make that suggestion.
He's a teacher, though, right?
He's a professor, not just a teacher. He's a professor.
Sorry.
And on top of that, one of the things that I'd flagged that he'd published is he published a whole paper on what it's like to be misgendered as a man who identifies as non-binary.
He wrote a
Oh,
personal paper on that?
Right. And it was published in a journal called Men's Studies.
well, isn't that offensive? They put
That's
it in men's studies.
I
Don't
was
they know?
wondering. I was wondering, but it's pretty neat that there are people who can build their careers on identifying as non-binary and then talking about how not everybody accepts it. That's pretty rich.
It
Okay,
really
so
is.
Cori, on some of the research you did on our new friend, he
Yeah.
teaches queer theory, gender theory, critical queer politics. This one's great. Coming out and sexual identity, but apparently he thinks it should be abolished. Intro to Gender and Sexuality Studies and the Sociology of Identity.
Yep.
Didn't
He
you
also
also find that this guy got a grant?
Yeah, he has a $1 million National Science Foundation grant for studying queer teenagers.
Oh my God.
So your tax money at work. Maybe it's been canceled since the Trump administration, but who knows? It's probably was already awarded. It's probably in his bank account already.
Good Lord. Okay, so,
We're in the wrong line of business, let me tell you.
Yeah, really? Jeez.
but he just, okay, we saw about this guy because he popped up and he was on Fox, I think.
Fox
He,
ran the article, I think, originally.
yeah,
Yeah,
California professor calls to abolish identities like gay and lesbian since they quote harm trans people.
yeah. What do you think? Is that a good idea or not?
What?
No, Corey, I don't think it's a
You
good
know,
idea.
wait a minute. Is this what got Dan Savage to,
Yep, this
didn't
is what Dan
Dan
Savage
Savage
was. Dan
jump in on
Savage,
this?
the very long time prominent gay sex commentator. That's probably not the best way to describe him, but it's what I'm going with.
Did you call him a gay sex
Well,
commentator?
he's like a
He
he's like
provides
a
commentary.
he's like a Dear Abby for gay men, and most of the topics that he touches on are related to sex. So he's not just that. I'm sort of typecasting him.
Okay, I for some reason I have no idea where my phone is. Does anybody know what Dan Savage actually tweeted this week about this?
Jamie,
It's
are you sure you're not using it right now to record the podcast?
No, this would be a computer.
Okay,
no,
just
it's
double
down.
checking. I'm just double checking.
It's right here.
What did Dan
Dan
Savage
said
say?
something about
I'm a gay man.
I don't identify as a gay man. Hold on, I'm sure it's
He
easily
says he
found.
identifies as a gay man, and then a
Does he
bunch of
identify?
people replied and said, "Dan, you don't identify as a gay man. You are a gay man." Although I would say he's actually making an identity claim.
Who is making the identity claim? Dan
Dan
Savage?
Savage. Yeah.
Okay, well, for full disclosure to all of our listeners, Cori asked that we invite this researcher on.
He's a professor. I misspoke when I said researcher.
Okay, well, his name is Brandon Robinson.
I believe we extended an invitation, did we not?
We
Yeah.
extended an invitation, but he's on sabbatical until June.
He needed
Well,
a
we'll
break.
have to
He does a
circle back.
lot, all that mental heavy lifting. He needed a breaky break.
Well, if he's on sabbatical, he should have time to record. This is like the best time to be a podcast guest. You don't have anything else going on, right?
Yeah, but the paper that you were talking about his own feelings, I think it was
Yeah.
called Non-Binary Embodiment, Queer Knowledge Production, and
Oh,
Disrupting the Cis-Normative Field.
right,
Notes from a trans ethnographer.
right. This is I think he should have a gold medal for this. This is pretty rich.
A trans ethnographer in the cis-normative world, Margaret Mead would like roll over in her grave. She would just be like, she goes to Samoa, and this guy's like, I'm a trans ethnographer in the
Yeah,
cis-normative world of
people people
California.
mis people misgender me a lot. That's his research. I'm a man, and people see me as a man, and that hurts my feelings. That's his, and I'm gonna write about it. That's his research.
How much can you write? Like, how long was this paper? What the hell?
Lauren, you should read it.
Well, this is
I'm
this is
not
why
reading
he
that
gets
crap.
credit. Is most people wouldn't be able to write about a topic like that for very long, but
That is true.
uh, I couldn't do it.
That is true. It is a certain
Oh
talent.
my
So
God. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I do have this paper. Um, can I just jeez. What's with us and the research papers today? Here's the sorry, I'm gonna read the first paragraph. I was assigned male at birth without my consent.
oh my God.
Does it say
My
that?
yes.
Okay.
My parents proceeded to raise me as a boy as they probably didn't know any other way.
Yeah.
Although they saw, treated, and called me a boy and son, my family did allow me moments for my gender expansiveness as a child, such as letting me get the girl Happy Meals at McDonald's,
Wow.
buying me Polly Pocket and My Little Pony toys, and indulging my love of the Spice Girls. They were not the only people, though, shaping my gender. Teachers, religious leaders, peers, and other people in my life also policed my gender and tried to remind me I was supposedly a boy. Perhaps the wrong, God, again, perhaps the wrong kind of boy, a gay boy, a queer boy, a sissy boy. As the word uses the F word, being lobbed at me would often remind me, but nonetheless, boy. I am a white, non binary, queer person.
Another effeminate gay boy bullied out of identifying as a man. Great. Real role model.
The theme keeps popping back up over and over and over again. And now I went from laughing to just sad.
Yeah, I mean, it's awful.
Thanks for this uplifting moment, Cori.
Sure.
And he frames it as some kind of victory to opt out of his own body and sexuality. It's like, yeah, it's like Stockholm syndrome.
That's interesting.
It's sad. But also, like, let's not pretend that this man is not profiting exceedingly off of his nonsense mental gymnastics. $1 million grant to study queer kids and a paper saying that we should not be using the words gay and lesbian.
Maybe we should just abolish all of the universities.
Maybe they could just start teaching real stuff like math and reading and critical thinking again. Just a thought.
Well, I'd be in favor of state institutions, state funded institutions, eliminating all of these types of programs. That would mean everything from women's studies to specific anything that has this sort of race, sex, religion. Maybe not religion, because religion has a historical aspect to it. So religious studies are a little bit different than these, but any sort of critical study, I think, should be
Well, I would
eliminated
agree with
from.
you that because women's studies didn't used to be a critical theories
Yeah.
subject either. We used to know what women were, what are, and study like the history of a, you know, minority class. Yeah, it's the critical studies that are really detrimental because they can
Well,
apply to anything, and all it does is tear down ideas
well,
without replacing them with anything.
it's okay to tear down ideas. The thing that I want to circle back to from this professor's own description of his paper is they regard it as knowledge production. But this is not knowledge production, it's opinion production.
Yeah.
It's viewpoint production, not knowledge production. And he is asserting, I've had this experience, now I'm relaying it to you. That's knowledge. It's it's not really knowledge. Uh it doesn't help us understand problems any better. All it does is help us understand this professor's experiences. It doesn't tell us anything about the world. It tells us about the writer. And in terms of knowledge, it's not any more valuable than somebody's uh, autobiography, which, as we know from autobiographies, the they are generally factual, but not necessarily always or consistently, right? This is somebody's um, Instagram note that they got published into a publication, right?
Yeah.
Into an academic publication, and to describe that as knowledge is tenuous.
Well, in the conclusion of his paper, though, um, do, do you ever feel like these are just really sad people who are just saying, I want joy and pleasure and embodiment, and they're just sad? But in the final paragraph, he writes, ultimately, we need new ways of doing research and producing knowledge, ways that center marginalized scholars, methodologies, and an emancipatory path forward would be to center the pleasure in our work. Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
A non-binary knowledge production values and centers pleasure, as this pleasure sustains non-binary people to continue to exist despite a world that says there are only men and women. Yeah. All right, well, I guess Brandon is probably not going to join us on our show.
We don't know. The only thing that we do know is that if we call him, he'll be upset.
Yeah.
But as you know, it's easy for us to avoid referring to a guest who has those types of sensitivities in the third person if they're present with us. The only thing that guest needs to worry about is how we refer to him absent his presence.
Which basically only comes up in the show notes. And I've had this come up already because I'm the one that writes the show notes and I just use people's first names.
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to avoid causing direct offense in those circumstances. And as long as the guest understands that we're going to talk about him afterwards, and it's not our intent to inflict any sort of distress or trauma on somebody, but we're just using factual sex-based grammar.
I'll also share with the listeners that I invited 6 other people to come on.
Wow.
Heard nothing back from any of them, but all of the leaders in the state of Kansas. So the ACLU, all of the LGBT orgs in Kansas leadership, I reached out to every single one and said, we would love to have a conversation with you, non-confrontational. Let's just talk through what's going on in the state of Kansas. And nobody. I'm gonna keep extending invitations. That's my goal.
Well, speaking of people who have received invitations,
We should
Nice.
Lauren, you should make an outtake video of all of our really bad segue statements.
Yeah.
how's that a bad segue?
No, that was a pretty good one. He's getting there.
I'm an experienced podcaster. Do you know there's another podcast that
We are not.
and we passed our 5-year anniversary, believe it or not.
I believe it.
We've passed the 1-year anniversary for this one, I believe.
I think so. Are you trying to shamelessly plug your other podcast before we do it?
No. I'm defending my competency at making segues. I have introduced so many guests on Heterodorks, which you can download in your favorite podcast reader.
I'm bleeping that out.
And because I've introduced so many guests, I could say something like, we're going to talk to Kim Jones, who is the leader of the icons. I'm trying to remember what that expands out
yeah,
to.
Oh my God, this has been great. This has been like a 5-hour.
You forgot.
Icons.
You don't even know who you're introducing?
Independent. Oh, what does icon stand for?
Oh yeah, this is great. Professional.
I am professional.
Anyway, listeners, we're about to go talk to 2 other people. We'll keep you guessing.
Wow.
Okay.
And we're back with Jen Say for part 2. So we got into a lot about Jen's history, and we're going to get more today into the actual state of women's sports currently. And we were just discussing some of the hurdles, and Jen You were talking about how you get a lot of your ads rejected for the language that you use because they insist that you have to use. Well, I'll let you explain the ad that you
Okay.
recently put out and tried to get some time on major networks with, and they rejected you.
Yeah, we created an ad. It was a video ad, but we did like a print interpretation of it. And it was built around the Supreme Court cases and how meaningful those are in terms of what could happen. And that we're really asking for the bare minimum here with these cases, which is that we not go backwards. It doesn't, even if we quote unquote win, all it means is that the 27 states that currently have laws protecting women's sports can continue to do so. It does not mean the 23 states have to change their laws. So in a 30-second ad, we tried to, in an emotionally resonant way, just communicate that we're just trying to hold our ground here. We're just trying to not go backwards. And don't get me wrong, I love the ad. We definitely tried to construct it in a way that would be accepted by mainstream media advertising people. So it was a little less aggressive, maybe, than some other things we do, that we just want to go viral. And we don't generally run on television. You know, we're a startup. We don't have television budgets, but we had a nice donor that was going to help and get this on TV for us. And so we submitted it to all the networks and all the mainstream newspapers. And we were rejected by almost every single one. We were rejected by CBS. We were rejected by the Wall Street Journal, Fox Sports, New York Times. The only one that accepted us, I'm missing some on the list, but those are top of mind, was NBC. And they actually did run it during golf. We ran during sports. And I think golf is a good place because people who golf, it does tend to be a little bit more conservative. So probably more people on our side. But every other network and newspaper either rejected it outright or said, we won't run it unless you don't say men in women's sports, that you're trying to keep men out of women's sports. They wanted us to say trans women. And first of all, that's incorrect because we want all men out of women's sports. I want Amani Khalif out of women's sports, who isn't really quote unquote trans woman, whatever that means. He's a man who maybe thinks he's a woman. I don't even believe that he actually does, but that's the point. So it's all men. We just want men out of women's sports, and they would not accept that copy. And so every time I feel like we are making progress, and there is progress, I think there is progress. These cases are being heard before the Supreme Court. But I come back to these facts, which is that we cannot run our ads even on outlets that would be considered conservative. I think most people would consider the Wall Street Journal more conservative leaning, for instance. Our viewpoint is not represented in the mainstream or legacy media. You know, they never talk to left-leaning experts on the issue. They exist in an echo chamber. And here's the fact I keep coming back to on the sports issue in particular. There is not a single major currently competing female athlete, Olympian or professional, who has spoken out. Not one. Not one. Think about that. They run their mouths about every political issue under the sun.
Well,
this one will cost them their career. They all know it.
Every political issue, all their
endorsements.
Yeah,
which is acceptable to the left. Every political issue which is acceptable to the left.
Right.
Not every political issue.
Fine, you're right. That's a good correction, Cori.
I bet.
Yeah.
Not taking a position on this, but I bet there aren't major female athletes who've taken strong positions on abortion. Maybe there are. Maybe there are.
I think some have been pretty outspoken about it. If you go back in time, a couple years, a lot of companies were speaking out about it. Do you guys remember when every company was saying, we're going to pay for women to travel for abortion?
Yeah.
You know, when the Supreme Court ruling came down, every company was saying, you know, our employees that live outside of these states will pay for your health care, will pay for your travel. And it was such a virtue signaling bullshit piece of idiocy because the companies that were housed in California don't have employees in those states anyway. So it was just dumb. But it's a
Virtue
good
signal.
question. It's a big virtue signal, exactly. It's a good question or point, Cori. I don't know. I haven't counted them up. I'd be willing to bet that Megan Rapinoe is pretty outspoken about abortion, but I don't know. I mean, she talks about.
Sorry, I'm
She
not like
talks.
in the pro-life.
Oh, yes. I mean, yes, you're right. They won't look. Yes, they won't. And I talk to and try to engage female athletes that are currently competing because I think that matters. They're currently competing. Not, we love Martina. Thank goodness for her for speaking out on this issue. But for younger people, I mean, they don't even know who she is. I hate to say it, but they don't. I mean, she's one of the greatest tennis players of all time, but they need to see someone of their generation who is popular now to feel confident speaking up. And I engage women all the time who I know are on our side because there's like cues and coded things that they post that and they're too scared that they will lose other endorsement deals. And you have to remember that for female athletes, most of them, even professionals, don't make very much money from playing the sport. A professional WNBA player, I think the entry salary is $70,000 or $65,000 a year. So if she's making a living, and it's lower in national women's soccer, it's 50, I think. And so if she's making any decent money, it's through endorsements. And that's what she's afraid she will lose. So those facts say to me, we really, really have a long road ahead.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like you just mentioned, there's still 23 states that do not protect the women's category in sports. So when girls go to compete nationally, they will still be competing with boys.
Well, can I just add to that? You raised such a good point because people, all of a sudden, many on the left are like, oh, this is a states' rights issue, which is not something they generally believe in.
Mhm.
But if you're a good athlete, you compete outside of your state.
Yeah.
You go to semi-nationals, you go to nationals. I mean, my son is 11 and he's competing in a national competition this weekend, a national soccer tournament. So this whole like state thing, it doesn't work
No, it
on this.
doesn't. It doesn't. And then there's also the other argument, like, um, D1, so college athletics and professional athletics, and people think that there's no reason to protect little girls. And it's nonsensical to me. Like, how are you going to get to that D1 level if you've been knocked out of category so many times, or you've been knocked down so many times that you're like, I don't want to play with the boys anymore? How do you get to the professional level if I mean, it's just,
Well, and
it's,
it's like saying only some women deserve fairness. So
yes.
you're conceding the point that it's not fair. At
Mhm.
USA Gymnastics, uh, they secretly changed their policy under the cover of night. It just changed one day on the website. But for a very long time, their official policy was at the elite level, that's the highest level that you compete on the national team, et cetera. You had to compete in accordance with your sex. But every other level, you could pick. So there's your point, which is okay, so let's just say I'm a level 10, which is the level right before. Like, how am I going to even get to that level? But the next point is, even if you're not vying to get to that level and you're a level 5, why does that little girl deserve unfairness? Everyone
Exactly.
deserves fairness.
Exactly.
It's so stupid.
Oh, it looks like we have Kim
Kim,
Jones. She's here.
I had the wrong
yay.
time. I thought it wasn't for an hour.
It's
So
all right. How you doing, Kim?
good. How are you?
All right. We're just starting to talk about like the state of sports today for women and how we still have 23 states that do not protect the female category. And there's so many arguments that it only matters when you get to elite level competition. And Jen just made the really good point that like, why do little girls not get to experience fair sports? Like, why
Mm.
is that where the conversation's going? we're trying to hash out where this is going and how far we have to go. And I think we still have a pretty far way to go, especially since half the country does think this problem has been solved.
Well,
Well,
I think
we
we all
don't
know each
really.
other. Oh.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we-
Cori,
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna introduce Kim because I think this is the first time she's been on Informed Dissent.
Yes, please introduce Kim.
Okay. Welcome, Kim. She is the leader of ICONS, which is the Independent Council on Women's Sports, and has been quite an effective advocate for raising this issue and persuading policymakers to give women a fair shot. And we all know Kim and have met her, but she's absolutely wonderful, and we're excited that she's with us.
Oh, you're so nice. Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I would actually say we don't even have protections for women across all 50 states. We are nowhere near half the country. If you're outside the purview of, Title IX, we're still waiting on the Supreme Court, but I don't expect that's going to protect, half the country, as Jen probably just got done saying. But even there are so many sports organizations outside of the U.S. Olympic and Amateur Sports Act and outside of Title IX. I mean, the U.S. Olympic and Amateur Sports Act covers twice as many women and girls as does the education aspect under Title IX. And any independent or private organization right now that wants to describe women as whatever they want them to, even in red states or blue states, and we're seeing this all over the country, they're free to do what they want. And not a single one of our NGBs underneath the U.S. Olympic and Amateur Sports Act is actually keeping women and girls safe. We know that from tons of different policies that are being enacted right now following the birth certificate model, where there are boys, we haven't, gotten these stories out into the media yet, but there are boys and men competing as women and girls that just have altered identification. And in some cases where identification isn't even checked, there's just like an honesty policy, which, Jen, how long have we known that honesty policies in sports don't work? So
I don't take performance enhancing drugs. I don't blood dope. Yeah.
We know that they'll cheat in Little League. The high school football teams will bring in players from outside school districts. Like, the honesty policy doesn't work, point blank. We know it.
Yeah. So, in the Olympic movement, in gymnastics anyway, the sport I know best, other countries have lied on birth certificates about the ages of athletes for decades, meaning, the Chinese team in 2008 had girls, there's an age, you have to be 15 to compete, and they put 12 and 13-year-olds in, but altered birth certificates. And adding insult to injury, to Kim's point, these boys don't feel like they're cheating. They feel like the culture has told them they are girls and they are women. And so if they have the piece of paper to prove it, that's just further, solidifies the evidence there. I think Kim raises a good point. People don't really understand how fractured the sports governance body is. There isn't one way to wave a magic wand and fix it everywhere. And I think as I was standing in the room back in February last year when Trump signed the EO, everyone I was surrounded by was like, oh, thank goodness this is over. And I was like, this is so not over. First of all, they're not going to adhere to it. That was pertaining to Title IX and the education system in particular. But I competed for close to 17 years, or maybe 15 years. I never once competed under the auspices of Title IX, not one time. I was only competed in the Olympic movement. I never competed in high school. I didn't compete in, any educational program, only in the Olympic movement. And to
you
Kim's
did in
point,
college, didn't you, or did you never compete at Stanford? No.
No,
Okay.
I did not compete. I was too broken at that point to make my way onto the competition floor.
Okay, so that's something I think a lot of people are not sure about. So Title IX is only protecting the women's sports category in terms of education and any government facility or whatever.
Title IX is a contract law between the government and entities that receive federal funding, and Title IX is only pertaining to the educational aspect of federal funding.
So this is why these sports bodies
Yes, if you compete
Okay.
for your high school team, if you compete in college, any sort of institution governed by Title IX, it should protect you. It's not. We know that. Then you have the Olympic movement, and underneath the U.S. Olympic Committee, there are NGBs are governing bodies for every sport. USAG is for USA Gymnastics, and they each set their own set of rules. I mean, they don't have to. The USOPC could say this is the rule you must abide, and here you need proof of you need a birth certificate and a test to prove it. I know birth certificates can be changed, but there's a whole other stream here, which I don't want to forget, which is privately run competitions and races. So like the Boston Marathon, which has a non-binary category, which is always won by men but uses women's times. You even have men running in the women's category who say they are women. That's a private board. That's a privately funded race. So you see, like it's too much to just, it's a whack-a-mole. Even if you won the Title IX argument and actually got it implemented, you've got the whole USOPC, then you've got the International Olympic Committee, which is separate. Then you have all these individual sports and races. And so that's why my feeling, and I think we all have to do this together, is because you do need legislation, you do need all the things, but if we change the culture and this becomes unacceptable, then everybody will have to make the move
Yes.
to change their rules. That's my thing, is like wage this battle on the cultural front lines. I don't think it means only the cultural front lines. So everything Kim and Icons are doing with the lawsuits and everything at the state level. I mean, I'm the chairperson of a ballot initiative here in Colorado to get legislation passed. Like, we need all of it. But I think it's important we not forget the cultural piece of it, because it's so fractured, this governance landscape.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So we had on Dan Z from Outkick magazine maybe a week or two ago, and
Yeah.
he brought something up about, I think he was talking about the NCAA, but how they were feeling all this pressure. And my question was, it's crazy because they're the only game in town. So some of these regulating committees, it's not like they're competing with other regulating committees on their sport. They're the say-so, and they're somehow being pressured by this small faction of society to go along. And it just doesn't make sense to me. It's like you have a monopoly on.
It does when you understand how the NCAA is organized. So the NCAA, like, we've got Charlie Baker, who's the lead, and I would argue, like, he's the president. And I would argue in private conversation, Charlie Baker knows this is wrong and he would like to see it changed. And he actually doesn't give two bats of an eyelash about whether, like, about fighting for these causes, or he's got no,
Of
like,
course
he
not.
would like to get this off of his plate. So, but he is under the, I mean, he serves at the pleasure of the board. And the board is made up of presidents of university institutions who stay in their power based upon keeping their faculty and students and all those folks happy. So the presidents, it's to the NCAA and even the conferences, like, we're finding this in our court cases right now where the judges are saying, oh, the Mountain West Conference isn't subject to Title IX. The NCAA, we're being questioned about whether or not they should fall under Title IX. The Ivy League, they're not under Title IX. It's such a bracket. I mean, the university system has set up like a mafia system, a money laundering system for the educational aspect of where athletics is an educational component of life on a campus, of someone's educational system. And they're saying, if we we're all individually subject to Title IX, but if we get together and form a group, a collective, with just our presidents or our universities together, then that group doesn't receive federal funding. So we're above the law. We can create policy that allows us to skirt federal law, equal protection, Title IX, you name it. We can abuse women and girls.
It's so interesting.
Whatever we want. And then the university systems, the individual systems, can point the finger and say, it's this policy that we have to follow. And, we're just doing what we're told. Please don't sue us. Don't take money from us. But because organizations like the NCAA and the conference systems, when we get together, we're no longer subject to federal law. So that's how it's working in, they're skirting accountability. But because Title IX is contract law, it's also, and this is a really important point to Jen's like culture thing. And I was thinking about this morning, even when it comes to like the whole Sharia law, like in this whole thing going on with Iran, this everyone's saying, well, let's ban it. Let's make a law to protect this. If we have a law, then we're safe. We have this like crazy mindset right now in the US that's just being crushed, where we think we're safe if there's a law that protects us. And we're not, because if you have power and culture are the two things absolutely necessary to enforce any law. You can't enforce a law if you don't have power and culture. And so when it comes to women's sports or transgender ideology, whatever you want to call it, we had some people that came in power and a political party behind them that was willing to adopt this mantra of redefining our language, rewriting some laws, or just simply not enforcing the laws that we had. So the fact that we think we are okay in some of our red states right now because we have laws on the books, as soon as there are people in positions of power or the culture doesn't enforce those laws, which is exactly what happens on a small scale when even in state laws where states where we have laws on the books to protect girls' sports, boys get through the cracks because the people who are in power at a school, at a district, at an athletic association level, they're saying, we don't agree with the law. And so we are going to hide the fact that it's being broken.
Yeah, the legislation is necessary, but definitely not sufficient. And I think we've gotten to the point where we need actual legislation to say, no, Title IX actually means actual women, which is ridiculous because obviously it says that in the law. It says on the basis of sex, not on the basis of gender identity. But we need it now because of the crazy. But the only reason we're here needing legislation for that is because the culture was taken from us. The language was taken from us. And we've got to wrest the culture back with that, with the full force it was taken from us. And I think that the left is, and I know some of us are on the left and some of us aren't, and probably most of us don't know where we fit at all, but the left is really, really good at the culture piece. Think about most of the popular cultural content, whether it's TV or movies or music, and yes, I'd include brands. They all further, for the most part, very leftist, woke ideologies. And the right has like My Pillow and, like what? This is what we have. We have like one artist. I guess now we have Nicki Minaj. But like, what, we got nothing.
Don't you think, Jen, though, that it's a culture? Shit. Don't you think that arose out of a culture of shaming and fear, though?
No, like I think the left cares. No, I think the left cares about it more. I think the left cares about art and content and culture more. And I think on the right, and I'm using those as convenient, easy dividers, left and right. But I think that on the right, there is a general feeling, I've thought about this a lot. There's a general feeling that is, I think, expressed in Ben Shapiro's Facts Don't Care About Your Feelings. And if we just say the facts enough, we will win. But they do care about your feelings. And the left has kind of gotten a hold of our feelings, and they've sort of forced this like idea that it's empathetic to tell boys they can be girls.
And so that's what I'm talking about, though. I think that succeeded because of shaming.
I see what you mean, because I think that there are less people that actually buy into it than would publicly attest to. Like, there's plenty of people, like, when you do private polling, none of these issues poll well with anybody.
Totally.
But yeah, it's a combination of shaming if you don't agree, but also a societal like elevation, a social elevation, if you proclaim that you believe trans women are women and that trans kids are magical unicorns. Yeah.
That's right. And all of these like major kind of cultural institutions, whether it's universities or just the legacy media or the other ones, music, Hollywood, brands, which have become left-wing led, they're furthering the message that no one agrees with. But then it seems like that's the mainstream and the consensus. And so all the rest of us are, even though, well, not us, but like a lot of the rest of us of the 80 are quiet because they fear that backlash. And the right, or the non-far left, or the non-super woke, is not good at combating that cultural message. And we come at it from a very logical legislation standpoint, but we need both. And all these people like Charlie Baker, I agree with Kim. He knows, but they're terrified. They just lack any and all moral courage at all.
That's what I mean by power. When you've got the power, power plus culture, you've got control. But I see Cori's wheels turning. What are you going to?
I want to pitch a book title, if you haven't read it, it's called "We Have Never Been Woke" by Musa El-Gharbi. And he talks about not just trans or gender issues, but he talks about the entire verticality of left,
all this stuff,
culture domination. And the framework that he presents is that at this point in history, there are so many elites that we have produced, elites being people who are educated and are primarily in fields.
Educated? Yeah, I was going to do the same thing.
I mean, there's a lot of variation in the educational attainment, but educated. And their work is primarily related to knowledge production or the production of symbols. So claims, media, things that are affect the culture. And that on top of that, in order to have any sort of participation or advancement in this elite hierarchy, you have to reflect and repeat the type of ideas that confirm your participation as an elite. So
I think that's right.
You're one of the tribe.
You are one of the tribe. Right now, there's a lot of alignment with the left with that type of production.
Yes.
Historically, or in other times and places, it's not necessarily left, but in the time and place that we're in right now, it is left.
It is left.
And the thing that bothers me about reading his thesis is, as long as it is seen to be inclusive and oriented towards social justice and promoting welfare, it doesn't matter at all whether the real world effects are in alignment. What matters is that the perception is in alignment.
Right. Smart. True.
You just, all those trigger words.
But it also doesn't matter if they actually think it. They want to be perceived as believing it, so they get to stay in the club. And one of the things I've observed in my own family, which other than me and my husband are very extremely left, is they are, this relates to what you're saying, Cori, I think. They are more loyal to the Democrat Party and the platform than anything else in their lives. There are members of my family who were Jewish and avowed Zionists, like members of our family, older generations who are Holocaust survivors who died in the Holocaust. And they will tell you to your face that that is the issue they care about. They are single issue voters. That's what they will tell you. They care about the state of Israel. Like, we don't have to get into whether anybody here does, but I'm just using this as an example. And then they vote for Mamdani. Because at the end of the day, that single issue that they say they care about will be sacrificed to stay as a good standing member of that elite class, and that's being a Democrat. And I'm constantly amazed by it. And I think cancellation largely is driven because most cancellation is people on the left who violate the party principles, right?
Yeah.
It's because you're a class traitor, right? I mean, That's what it is. If you're
Right.
a
And they
corporate
will literally
executive,
remove your ability to
girl,
have a life, right? So like
girl,
you're a traitor to
yes,
Amongst
your
their
class, we're
crew.
going to make
Yeah.
sure you financially hurt and you are no longer of this
you are no
class.
longer welcome because we had a
Yeah.
deal. Our deal was we would take the money for ourselves. We would give ourselves crazy bonuses, but we'll pretend we're super woke social justice warriors so nobody comes for us with a hammer. And if you violate that, and you say, wait a minute, these policies are not actually good for everyday people, and here's why. And I'm actually adhering to what I thought were liberal principles in exposing this, you will be ousted forever. I am here to tell the tale of that story. Like you will. Because it's a violation of exactly what Cori described, Anyway, that's philosophical. But I think basically we need more. We need all of it, right? We need the legislative push. We need the right politicians. But I think until we change the cultural conversation and that 80 and the 80-20 say it, I don't think we can, holistically win. I mean, Kim said it, just because there's a law in the books doesn't mean, look, when the Civil Rights Act passed, does anyone here believe that ended racism once and for all?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we just had another example with the Mirabelli case on the shadow docket of the Supreme Court saying that schools cannot secretly socially transition kids without parents' knowledge. And the California Teachers Association came out with a statement like that day saying, no, but we're still going to do that.
Right.
Well, and that's exactly what's happening in
Yeah.
sports too. I mean, the
With San
people who
Jose
are,
State, yeah.
Yeah.
well, not just San Jose State, obviously putting their foot down and saying, well, we're going to, sue you back.
Yeah.
Even, I mean, in completely illogical form, like referencing DNA in their statement was pretty ironic. Did you guys catch that? Yeah.
Yes. It's in the
So,
DNA of our
yeah.
whatever, our institution.
Yes,
You're like,
right.
yeah, you believe in DNA, do you?
Yeah, it's nuts. But I mean, even in like USA Cycling, we've got people telling us that there are, as the boards of these national governing bodies are changing their policy, like board members are in tears. They're saying, I mean, all over not allowing men to compete with women, in some cases in very violent, full contact sports. And you're like, how did we get here? I mean, it's outrageous to think that we are here. And then there's, we've got Irish Dance, which is a separate organization getting ready to host world championships in the US and getting ready to host national championships. And even under executive order, federal law, culture, I mean, we have a lot of social and political pressure right now. There is plenty of cover for any NGB to do the
Yeah.
right thing. Plenty of cover. And we still can't, I mean, US Masters Swimming, who isn't under the US Olympic and Amateur Sports Act, but is under World Aquatics. So outside of like our US law system, they're a private entity considered here, but is supposed to be following international federation rules, has just released a policy the other day that basically said, well, depending upon your zip code, wherever we host our meets, men can get recognition as women and get all their awards and everything. But if we hosted a meet in Florida or a red state, then you can't compete. The men can't compete there. I mean, these are insane caveats to a torn apart system where we cannot agree on the most basic foundational principles of life, of biology, of science, of women's rights across our country. How are we going to deal with bigger threats? I mean, it's
insane. But
it's
don't you think,
insane.
because I totally agree with you, there's plenty of cover. Their perception is, and it may not be totally incorrect, that the vast majority of that cover comes from the right, which is half the country. So, but that's like they don't want, like Seth Moulton, Congressman Seth Moulton, who said he didn't want his daughters getting run over on the soccer field by boys, Democrat congressman, who then, had threats and protests outside of his house and essentially kind of walked it back and then voted against the, protection of girls' sports. The cover he gets is from people like us and people more on the right, and that's not sufficient to him. He wants cover from his base, which is Democrats, and he's not yet getting that.
That's my point about, I think that we are, the left in particular right now, and I even think a lot of people in the middle are being, well, I mean, honestly, even people on the right are being governed by fear and shame.
Yes.
And that's it's less, in my opinion, the culture of, like, Jen, some of your videos have hit on this really well, but it's like our virtues can't be conformity and I'm going to do what I'm told and I can be steamrolled. Our virtues have to be courage and seeking truth and standing up for what's right. And it's and
But
speaking up, not being silenced, being demanding debate, demanding our perspectives to be heard.
yes, but that's what they think they do on the left. They think that they are the most, San Francisco is the most aggressively conformist place you could ever set foot into. And they think of themselves as good trouble. I'm, citing John Lewis's statement about good trouble. And for me during COVID, this was like the thing that was running through my head. All of these people, John Lewis died during that time, and all these people on the left were posting, memes and tributes calling themselves good trouble. And I was like, you are the most conformist people ever in the world. You've never seen trouble in your life. You have never stood up in a room and said a thing that every single person in that room disagreed with and held your ground. Not one time ever. So who are you to talk about good trouble? But they believe they are not the conformists. They believe that they are the ones standing up and being courageous and being empathetic and being all the things. And so we just, the way to flip that script and make it clear is, I think, culture. It is culture. Anyway, I don't know how we chip away at it, but that's what they believe about themselves. They don't believe they're good little followers and good little conformists. They believe they are freedom fighters. They are civil rights activists. They equate themselves with, marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and getting the shit kicked out of them. They think they're heroes in this long fight towards justice and progress, instead of people that are taking women's rights away and harming children.
Well, I think we're all doing our part to try to change that conversation culturally. I mean, just having this conversation is something that a lot of people are afraid to do. If you two, though, if you had one opportunity to strike one blow and win, where would you focus those efforts? Like, what do you think we could do either legally or federally or with these governing bodies that would make the biggest difference right now? Because we have made some progress, but it's still, we're not where we need to be. So where do you think we should all be concentrating our efforts to affect some change, at least legally, so that we have some cover culturally?
I have the first thing that pops to my head is, and this is what our point was with the lawsuits. I mean, I totally agree. And a big part of what we do is culture, right? Like we speak to the athletes, we try to encourage them to speak up. We try to be their voice in situations where they can't be. We try to speak to the board members, like the culture of sports, be brave. And then Jen doing it with her videos and everything. Just, it's exactly what we think we need to be doing. But we know that so I don't actually think we need more legislation. I think legislation is brilliant because it puts a stake in the ground and says, here's where we stand, and we want to be clear on this is what we meant. But what we actually need is a court decision that specifies this is what this means. And we shouldn't need that, but that's what we need right now. And so the biggest thing I want from these court cases is I want pain and suffering to be put down on the shoulders of the people that did this to girls and women. So I want a $100 million judgment or payment or more than that against the institutions that have harmed these girls. When it comes to the NCAA, I want it to be much bigger than that. I want there to be a value associated with the fair treatment and obeying laws that protect women and girls. I want there to be a punishment for those that have openly disregarded it. I do not want, like in the San Jose State lawsuit, where they're like, oh, but we were doing what we were told at the time, and this was the interpretation. I do not, I want it to be very clear that you cannot say, oh, there's an activist in power, or I want to listen to this lawyer and this legal advice is interpretation of the law. No, the law is the law, and you have to follow it. You don't get to interpret it. You don't get to understand it your own way, and you don't get to shift off your responsibilities. I want there to be justice. And so I think there was a court case. I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but let me just get this little bit out. There was a court case, I think it was in the Midwest somewhere, for a girl that wanted to use a boys' bathroom. And she sued her school because she didn't get access to that boys' bathroom for like, I don't know, 4 to 6 months of the school year, something like that. And the school district didn't want to go to court, so they ended up settling with her for $800,000. And that, and a couple of other cases where especially girls sued for access to the boys' bathrooms, the school districts has started just folding and paying the kid that they weren't allowing into the boys' bathroom to say, we're sorry, we're wrong, we understand. That has to flip, because that compelled all the school districts, all the states, all these people to think without actually, real change in the court system or in the laws, that this is the way the law was actually supposed to function. We need the inverse of that to be a major hammer to come down. I mean, it's the same reason I want the lawsuits for the detransitioners, but especially for the girls that have had their opportunities and their education stripped of them, and all of these things that were guaranteed by the passage of Title IX taken from them by people who said, yeah, we'd rather not follow that law. And I don't want it to just be up to an administration, whoever is in power at the White House, saying, yeah, we don't want to enforce that law. We're not like the Biden administration saying, we're going to just look the other way because we like the way the law is being interpreted here. And I want the law to be the law, and I want there to be a major price to pay.
Yeah, because this last Supreme Court case that came up for sports, it won't really do that, right? It will just say, if you want to protect the female category, you can, and that's up to the states. And what would a case look like that would force the hand of the Supreme Court to say you must?
Our cases.
Yeah.
That's why they're there. We considered those cases, the West Virginia case and the Idaho case, defensive cases, because the ACLU was on the offense there, trying to strike down the laws protecting women and girls. And our cases are on the offense, saying, no, you have to eradicate policies that allow men into women's sports, and our lawsuits are also in their locker rooms, or mislead women into believing that a man is a woman. You can't do those things. So strike down the policies that allow them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a way the decision could be written in these that it could go that far, but nobody thinks that it will. They think it'll just be sort of a defensive position that will win the defensive position, but it won't go on offense. So yes, I agree with that. It's basically like we're asking for the bare minimum to be allowed to have laws at the state level, but not be required to. I think I agree with Kim on everything pretty much always. I've yet to find something I disagree with Kim on.
I'm sure we could find it if we try.
I'm sure we could. Probably on other issues, but that's fine. We don't care. I think the one thing I just keep telling myself, and I tell everybody, is there is not one fix. There's no quick fix. It took 2 decades, if not more, to get here. And it's not going to be like one thing happens and it's the wave of a wand and it's over. So get ready. Get your endurance going, because you're going to get little wins along the way, and it will happen very slowly. And then hopefully at some point all at once. There just isn't one thing. And I agree, the money piece is really important. When institutions feel the pain, that starts to make a difference. I think we'll see that in the detransitioner cases. But I want to just give you an example that sort of is the opposite of that, not to be a total bummer here. But USA, the athletes who were sexually assaulted by Larry Nassar, there have been, I think, $300 million in payments paid out to these young women from the Justice Department because of the FBI's failings, from USA Gymnastics, that one was 96 million, and from USOPC, and from Michigan, University of, or is it, no, it's Michigan State, sorry. Those organizations have paid out more than $300 million to the victims. And guess what? And the head of USAG was fired. He was arrested, but it never went anywhere. Nasser's in prison for life. Do you think there's still abuse in gymnastics?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have athletes that write me every single day and ask me what to do. So I'm not being a bummer here, I swear to God. But even that, like, that's a massive amount of money, $300 million. And it still hasn't changed, because the culture in gymnastics is so freaking old school that they still believe that this abusive coaching style is just tough coaching. And so I think it's better. I don't think it's fixed. And so even that it's necessary, but again, not sufficient. I think what I would like, so I know that's a huge bummer thing to say, because we'd love to believe there's this massive judgment and everything changes overnight. But
I think it shifts the fear a little more in the other direction. And that's where I think we have to go to get the culture started.
I totally agree. I think on the, what I would like to do that one, I want to get this ballot initiative voted for here in Colorado and be the first big blue state to have a law in the books that protects girls' sports. Hopefully we'll get that done. I don't know, but we did get the signatures to get it on the ballot. So that's the good news. I'm focused on the culture piece. I want to get 5 major cultural figures now, not past their prime, now, major cultural figures to come out and just vociferously be in defense. They have so much money, they shouldn't care if they lose endorsements or any of it, that they just, with full-throated certainty, say men can't be women and women deserve their own sports and spaces. That's what I want to do. And I spend time on it every single day, talking to people and trying to get them to say what they already believe. I don't care if they're on the right or the left. It's probably some combination. Maybe no one knows what their politics are, but I think that's a long haul. I think that's going to take me quite some time to get, but I feel confident I'm going to convince someone at some point to do it. But again, it's not like, Charles Barkley has been full-throatedly in defense of women's sports, but I need someone now, like in their 20s or early 30s, who was recently competing or is a major star. And then we need another, and then we need another. Like there just isn't, it's a huge bummer, but there's not like one thing that's going to just cause the house of cards to, fall. We need all of it all the time for a long, long time. And that's hard to hear because we're all tired.
Yeah, and that would just be getting us back to like a state of normalcy. Like,
right.
I think we touched on it like last time, but without having this monkey wrench of men and women's sports come up, we could have been working on so many other things.
Yeah.
To kind of advance women in athletics. And we're back at like, it's not even 0. We're back at like -15 now.
Yeah.
Trying to get minimum. To a point where we can just have the bare minimum of our own sports. And there's just so many things we could be working on, expanding access to sports in inner cities, or
yes.
There's just so many things.
And sports, like, when Jen says she's working on the culture piece, like the sports, I don't know how many of you saw Ross's comment on Malcolm Gladwell, and I'm blanking on his name, the interview between the two of them.
Trevor Noah.
That's right,
yeah.
Trevor Noah.
Yeah.
And he was saying like, oh, if you give up sports, you have to give the trans movement everything else they're asking for. No, totally. And Ross Tucker's comment on that was so good. He was like, sports is the bellwether.
Yeah.
Like that's how and this is what I've been saying. I remember even talking to Cori about this when, a long, long time ago, like early on when we first met, and saying like, it's the public arena of the difference of the sexes. This is this is where we're confronted with it right in front of our eyes. And this is where sports is the culture of do we follow rules? Do we have integrity? Do we celebrate
champions? Merit?
Do we believe in is the last true merit, right? Do we celebrate women as different but equally valuable? Like it is how we all rise. It is a way, I mean, there's other intellectual pursuits and there's art and there's music and stuff, but sports is like the pure, like it's not subjective, right? It's not supposed to be subjective.
No,
it is merit.
Except gymnastics.
So if we see men and women and we see this absurdity play out in sports, it's like, duh, this should rationalize everything else.
It causes everything to crumble, because if you acknowledge, if the culture says women must have their own sports, that's a implicit and explicit acknowledgement that it's because men and women are different, right? That's what that is. But how frustrating is it to watch those two men tell us what we need to do and tell us, sorry, ladies, if you want this thing, you're going to have to give up everything else. I mean, imagine, it's like saying, I tweeted this, I think, or wrote about it this morning. If you want the right to vote, ladies, if that's what really matters to you, 1920 suffragettes, you're going to have to give up all the other rights. Property ownership.
No education for you.
No education for you. And rape, that doesn't exist because boys will be boys.
Cori is dying to get something out. Say something, Cori. Go.
I actually want to make an argument for Malcolm Gladwell, because I think here's how it should work. We remove males from women's sports, right? But now women have to give all of their unwanted makeup and lingerie to trans women. That's the trade.
I'm a huge Gladwell hater, so I don't really like anything he has to say. I think he's like a pop culture sociologist who spews pablum and gets respected as like an intellectual, and he is anything but. And his ideas are dumb or patently obvious, and I don't know why anyone listens to him. And to just have him, but I appreciate your take, but like hearing these two men sit there and tell us what we ladies are going to need to do to get what we want in sports, you're going to have to give up all that other stuff, ladies. Like what matters to you?
What ticks me off more than anything is when men say, like, there's that perspective of saying men say this and they're not women, they're telling women what to do. But the other perspective is like men, like, and I keep saying this, by virtue of being born male, have all this physical power in society. Like in every interaction with women and children, there is a power differential. And power, we all know, can either be used for, if it's not used for good, it's going to be used for abuse. And so you have a responsibility. It couldn't be more clear with all of the data and the biology and the statistics we run. Like all you got to hear is men punch 162% stronger than a woman. Like pound for pound, inch for inch, men are way stronger. Men's arms are like the strength of women's legs. Like we have all of this data we can measure in labs and in science, and we see it play out in sports. And then we have men saying, we don't have to stand up. We have no responsibility to stand up and do the right thing for women and children. You have the power, folks. And from that physical power comes social, political, economic, all of it trickles down. If you don't use that responsibly for the people that are depending on you, like women and children, the respect has to come from men to empower women and children to be treated equally. It has to come from that. I get that. I hate it, but I get it. But the other thing is that when men abuse that power and they let women and children down, they sink. It's because it's just the whole culture falls apart. You can't have a society where you don't respect 50% of the population. You can't have a society where you don't understand science and the imbalance. You can't function as a community. So like, it's really important for these men not to continue to be such I have really bad language in my mind right now.
Pathetic losers.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, that's a nicer way to say it.
Kim, could I add an addendum to that?
Yeah.
There are men who will respond to that and say, look, I'm using the same arguments and rhetoric that my female friends use. They support inclusion. They support social justice. And I'm not even giving my own opinion. I'm just amplifying their opinions. And to
Yeah,
that,
we're all doomed if we don't turn our individual brains on.
Yeah.
that's,
Well, they're
you have to
talking.
make an
Yeah, they're
assessment, not just
yeah.
echo what other people say. You have to make an assessment.
Well, that's the thing. And most people, we all talk to these people. They think they're the smart ones, that they're the educated ones, and they're spewing the taglines that are fed to them. I've had many interactions with people one-on-one here in Colorado, and they say all the things. I'm like, where did you get these lines? Where they say they're going to do genital checks. This harms all women. Like all the lines, and they can't really justify them. They don't, well, trans girls are girls, so they don't listen to what you're saying, Kim, about men have more strength because they don't think they're men. Like the whole thing is so illogical and can't sort of withstand any scrutiny, which is why they don't allow any scrutiny.
What happened to our brains? It's we all have things between our ears that we're supposed to use for critical thinking and thought process. Like it's survival skills. I am really.
That's why
Yeah,
I
go, Cori.
constantly call this whole thing a civilization-ending concept, because it is.
Totally. I agree with you. Cori, what were you going to say here, Reese?
Well, just keep in mind, if Musa El-Garbi's thesis is correct, they are using their brains, and this is survival. They are saying things that they don't believe are true in order not to get canceled or excluded.
Yeah,
But
and
it's
fear has a
short-term.
way of really
It's
twisting your mind.
short-term.
But Cori, to your point, and I don't remember who said this or wrote this recently, the people that are more educated and even smarter, and those things aren't the same, they're almost better at deluding themselves because they can create more complex arguments that make no sense.
Yes.
Regular everyday people look at this and go, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
The
That's
non-elites.
stupid. The non-elites, right? They go, this is really stupid. Of course, men are stronger than women. This is dumb. But the smart elites are like, oh, you peons, how do you not understand the most up-to-date ideas about sex and biology? And we're really smart, and we're going to tell you what to think about this. And they do it on other subjects too. I mean, it happens across the board. They were the ones telling us that 2-year-olds in Paw Patrol masks were going to save grandma, which was patently ridiculous on its face. But they knew better than we did. But this one is civilization ending because it's the most basic fact that everybody has known since the beginning of time.
Well, and that all of science and understanding and human interaction and relation are based upon too. Like,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And truth. You can't have a society without truth. You can't have a society where half of the people believe in one thing and half of the people believe in something else, and we can't agree on what reality is. But I actually have a great illustrated example of exactly this kind of elite brain rot that we're talking about. So I was a contractor for 20 years. And in Philadelphia, there's a lot of old homes, a lot of plaster. It's very hard to find somebody who can repair plaster correctly. So I would get a lot of calls for that. I go into this woman's home. I'm doing the plaster work. I'm there. She's at home typing, working at home the whole time. And I made the dumb mistake of asking her what she was working on. And she starts telling me, oh, she's so excited. She's getting her PhD. And her dissertation is already going to be published. They're going to make it into a book because it's groundbreaking. And, mind you, I'm there covered in plaster. I look like just working class Joe Schmo. And you could tell by the way she looked at me after all this interaction. She just thought I was dumb. So I ask her what she's working on. She's telling me about this dissertation. And I'm like, so what is it about? Because she was kind of going around. I'm like, well, what's it about? And she was like, well, basically, it's about how doctors rely too heavily on biology and not enough on gender and race. And I just like without thinking
When was
responded.
this? When was this?
This was maybe 2 years ago when I was still in
Okay.
Philadelphia. And
Okay.
I responded with well, not for nothing, but if I go to the doctor for a hemorrhoid, I sure hope he knows where my asshole is at. And she did not think it was funny. I never
Oh,
heard
no.
from her again. I finished the project and she was not working in the kitchen typing the rest of the week. So, but this is someone who has she's PhD
Yes.
educated
Yes.
and said this with all the conviction of like that she had earned this knowledge and that I was just stupid because I
Yeah.
didn't get it.
Well, you called her baby ugly.
I did. Get right in her face. Yeah, but she didn't. But what's
Worse,
also
she called her
ironic.
stupid. Yeah.
But what's also ironic was she couldn't fire me because she'd spent 3 months trying to find somebody who could do plaster repair.
Right.
So I constantly saw this dynamic of we're so much smarter than you, but
Yeah.
can you please help me screw in my light bulb?
Right.
So it's terrifying because this is now a book. This person has I think she was at Penn, so this isn't a joke of a school.
Right.
Well, I would argue.
Yeah,
It
okay.
is.
Fair enough.
That's a great story.
They're notorious for some pretty jokey things.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, they are.
Ladies,
That's an awesome story.
I'm so sorry, but I've got to depart here. But please continue. And it was wonderful
Nice to see
catching
you.
up with you, Jen and Kim and Lauren. I'll see you around.
Nice to see you,
Bye, Cori.
Cori.
Thank you, Cori.
Well, I get a similar, what I keep getting lately, I started off, Kim, before you got here, talking about how the harassment that I get has been increasing lately, whether it's the phone calls or the whatever, the threats and all that stuff, because I think they're, a little bit on the back foot. Rather than calling me stupid, though, what they tend to do is try to explain to me that I have been, like, my brain has been captured by the alt-right fascists. I've been
Isn't that ironic?
I've been taken over, like, by some sort of, dark force. I've been possessed. And
Yeah.
I don't see that yet, but I will have to come to terms with it one day and reckon with the fact that I handed my brain over to these dark forces. Because they can't argue with the pedigree, right? Like, they can't say I'm uneducated, I went to Stanford, whatever, like all the dumb things. I have the checklist. So instead, it's that I have been captured, by a toxic
It isn't that
ideology.
ironic, because
I know.
I would
They're
argue
the
like it's the same thing. Like they're speaking to their mirror image.
Yeah.
But we both feel that way about the other. And so frequently, like my husband always says, you've got to do the gut check all the time. You always have to ask
Yeah.
yourself, am I the one making the mistake? Am I the problem here?
Right.
What am I not seeing correctly? And it's interesting because in this situation, this is not difficult. Like
No.
the basic common sense, like you can make a list, science, I can measure this. Let's talk about the facts. Let's lay things out. Let's eliminate mantras. Let's get down to basic definitions. Let's talk about measurable, actual things that we know, and like we know that women have babies. We know that their bodies are formed around ova. We know there's a physical difference. We know what testosterone does. Like, we know the effects of androgens on the body are permanent. We know the effects of genetic expression are permanent. Like, I keep double checking those things, like, wait, am I being a jerk? You always are asking those things, but it doesn't seem like the
Well,
self-awareness to do that's coming from the other
I think
side.
no, because the propaganda is so powerful and they don't ever get to those facts. They've rejected it before they get to the facts. And honestly, if you give them facts, for the most part, their eyes will glaze over and they stop listening. It's like we've lost that battle at the sort of highest level, like the emotional battle. And so all the facts, they fall on deaf ears. I'm not saying we don't need those, but those are like the last point of defense. And we sort of gave up the first point of defense already, because it matters. Like, the debate that you helped me prepare for, Kim, with Steamboat, I cited a lot of these facts, and at the end of it, I had
Yeah.
persuaded, I mean, something like 90% of the people that viewed and listened voted that I had won, and they didn't start there. It was much lower to start with. And even the guy I was debating by the end conceded almost every point that I made. He just at the end was like, well, why can't you just be nice and let
Right.
these,
It's a
you
lot
know,
of rhetoric. It's a lot
yeah.
of rhetoric. And actually we interviewed Derek Jensen. I don't know if you guys know who he is, Deep Green Resistance, but he's
Mm-mm.
spoken about this topic a lot. He's a professor, intellectual, and he gave the example of how like you really can't rely on rhetoric. So he gave the example of like you go to this white nationalist website that people are calling a hate group, and they're across the screen it says we're not a hate group, we just love white people. And he said, well, you can either say you can't rely on rhetoric, or okay, they're not a hate group. So you have to have some level of critical thinking and some base knowledge, or you're just relying on mirroring these slogans like we hear all the time, trans women are women. And they are such thought terminating slogans
Yeah.
that people can, because they're taught that it's not rhetoric, that it's a
Fact
moral
based. Yeah.
imperative and it's a
Yeah.
fact, they can't get past it. So when you start
Yeah.
questioning them, that's where all these conversations end up so circular. You'll make your point, you'll make
Yeah.
your point, you'll make your point, and then they'll
And
be like, "Well, trans women are women," and it's like,
Yeah.
ugh.
I just
Yeah.
want you to replace the word with its actual definition,
Yeah,
and that like just put in place. If I recite that mantra, what you're really saying is men are women.
yeah,
And
Yeah. I
then what world do you live in?
yeah,
yeah. I it does end up circular like that. Lauren, I mean, the one kind of conversation I say all the time that I had with this woman here in Colorado, she thought I would just back down instantly. She asked me to not have my daughter wear a certain T-shirt, and it went on for 10 minutes. And every sort of tagline she spewed, I had a response to. And at the end, she said, "Well." She was trying to build a bridge, and she said, "Well, at least we can agree that we all care about girls. I just care about all girls." So it
hmm
goes back to the trans women or trans
it
girls
goes
are
back to the
girls,
rhetoric.
and
Yeah,
it just ends because she can't really argue the point. And so it took a long time to get the culture there to repeating that pablum and those stupid phrases, and it's going to take a long time to unwind them, and it's going to take laws and facts and taglines that replace that tagline that are actually true, and it's going to take emotion, and it's going to take because they feel like they're being empathetic towards this vulnerable population. It's going to take them seeing that they are being dismissive of half the population, and they deserve our support and empathy. And girls and women not just are different, but deserve all the things that we think they deserve. They don't see it that way. They don't see that they're taking from girls and women. They see that they're being nice to boys who think they are are girls. And
yeah,
I just don't see a shortcut to undoing this. I just don't. It's like, I think I might have used this example last time. If you gain 100 pounds, you're not going to diet one day and lose it overnight. And like the culture gained 200 pounds of lies here, and it's going to take just as many years to chip away and unwind them and get us back to truth. And I hate it because I'm really tired too. Um, but you got to celebrate the wins and then I guess keep going.
yeah. I think what I see happening too is that like right now it's a lot of very young women who are defending the boys and girls sports and just the trans in general. And I try to think of myself when I was 20. And I feel
Yeah.
like there's a huge difference in how I understand not just myself as a woman, but my place as a woman in the greater context of society that has really changed in the last 20 years, right? Like at 20,
Yeah.
you're bright-eyed and full of optimism and you believe in equality and you just think if you're nice, then people are going to be nice to you. And it takes a few incidences, right? Like unfortunately, it takes women bad experiences with men often to realize that you do have to take steps to kind of protect yourself.
Well, and even beyond that, like what you're saying, I frequently say like when I'm talking to politicians or people in positions of leadership who are absolutely being cowards right now, not finding their courage to do the right thing when they are called upon it and watching horrible things happen to girls. This responsibility to right the ship, to fix the world, to stand up for what's right, it can't fall on the shoulders of women. It can't, like, the NCAA cannot ask for 100,000 girls in collegiate sports to put their name out there saying, we don't want to compete again. We want you to protect our category. We know what the right thing to do is. The people in charge know what the right thing to do is. You don't need little girls in middle school to boycott their shot put events in order to know how to handle this.
Yeah.
You're an adult for a reason, and you have responsibilities for a reason. Now own up to it.
Yeah. No, it's true because so many people are like, these girls just shouldn't compete. But it's like, but that's the whole problem, right? You're telling them that they have to give up what they want so that they don't have to give up what they want
Well,
or
it's
what
not
they've
just
worked
that,
for.
because in this situation in college, you're asking them to give up the safety of their environment, because you're
Yeah.
asking them to give up their sports opportunities. You might be asking them to give up all of their friendships and their social networks, all of the infrastructure that's there to support them in countless other ways, because
Yeah.
you don't have the courage to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And other adults don't have the
Man,
courage to speak up.
yeah.
Well, thankfully, these girls have two women like you who are not afraid to stand up and do the right thing. And I'm sure years from now, you're going to be getting a lot of thank you cards. I'm sure
Yeah.
you do now, but really,
I might be
everybody.
dead by then.
I just hope we all learn the
Exactly.
lessons of how important it is to find your backbone. And honestly, like, I think Jen would agree with this too. Like, the liberation, the individual liberation that comes from thinking for yourself, from speaking for yourself, from knowing where you stand and standing up for it is incalculably valuable. So,
It is. And I don't want to be the bummer here. I have to go in a second. I even have moments. Look, I sacrificed everything, not on this issue, on a different issue that we talked about in the last episode. I gave up the city that I loved. I have family members that I am estranged from. I don't have, every friend I had from the time I was 18 years old, a career that I spent 30 years building. If you don't think I have days where I'm like, why didn't I just keep my mouth shut? I mean, I don't do it obviously, because then I find my backbone even more and I go, I'm going to keep going. But in some ways, my life would be incalculably easier if I had. And so that's the enticement. Now, it's not me, it's not my makeup. I could never have done it. I didn't think about doing it, not even for 1 second. But I get it. It's hard. I mean, I have empathy, and that's why it's gonna. I think it's important to remember that, because that's why it's hard to get people to join us, because there are costs, at least in this stage. There won't
Yeah.
be later, but there are right now. And look, we have athletes that reach out to us all the time, or that we reach out to, that don't totally get what we stand for. They just think, oh, this is a brand and we'll get some money, or they do kind of understand, but they don't understand. The risk. And I explain it to them. I say, this is, you have to be fully on board and you have to be ready. And we have in fact had a few sign with us and then asked to undo it because we announced, and they got some, a mean DM or something. And so, most people don't, now these are young women, but most people don't have the wherewithal to weather that storm, and they want to join after it's like 30 or 40% of people have joined,
Yeah.
when it's much safer. So I'm that makes me seem like a coward, that I
I'm
say
gonna put some icing on the top of that to make
okay.
it sound a little better. And that is
Okay,
that I think
sorry.
the costs of not speaking up are always greater than the cost of speaking up
I totally
in
agree.
the long run.
Yeah.
I
So
totally agree.
it's just I think, and this is something that Cori was talking about earlier too, like a lot of this, when we're talking about the people who are bought in to have their social network or whatever, I think a lot of this can be solved if you're like, I'm looking at the
Yeah,
long road,
play the
the
long
long
game.
haul. Where do I want to be? What do I want to
Yeah,
be remembered for?
totally.
How do I want to grow as an individual?
Totally.
What example do I want to set? Like, if you are looking further down the road versus
I
the
agree.
comfort of right now, you're going to make a very different decision. And I do think that
I
the
agree.
costs of not finding individuals and even groups of people with that kind of courage and throwing yourself along with them when you find those people are a lot greater. So
I
anyway,
totally
my
agree with you.
rah-rah.
And I agree with you. And I think the only reason I say what I say, which I don't mean to be a bummer, but just a reminder to myself of the kind of influence we need to have to really build a larger coalition, and the resistance, and why it is there. I think it's important to understand that when you engage people and convince them and use that argument, Kim, and what kind of person do you want to be. And I never for 1 second, I would have been like, my soul right now would be just dark and crushed if I had made the other choice to stay quiet in several instances, in the past. So I am with you, but I think we need to understand the
Where they're
pull
coming from, for
of
sure.
the short-term benefits of not saying anything, to be able to approach them and bring them on board and build a coalition. That's kind of
Agree.
all. I don't say it to be a
100%.
total bummer. I say it
No.
to strengthen our argument.
No,
I'm sorry,
I
ladies.
mean, I completely understand why the women in the Ivy League shut down once the people that were like their athletic directors and coaches in the Ivy League was coming after them. And just, I mean,
Yeah.
bullying works. You
Yeah.
just have to
Right.
recognize bullying when it's happening.
Yeah.
So
I have to
anyway.
go look at product for spring 2027. Sorry.
Yeah, get some more stuff out there. Ironically, the one thing I can think of that really helps to build those character traits that you would need to stand up to this stuff is
Sports.
sports.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
summary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Very
going,
good.
ladies. Nice to see you all.
Thank you, ladies.
Bye. Thank you.
Before we go, a word of thanks. Lauren and Cori sat down this week with Jen Say and Kim Jones, two amazing women who have really paid a price for saying true things out loud. We're really grateful that they were both willing to come on the show. I want to come back here at the end to that UN vote for a minute. The Commission on the Status of Women exists to protect women. It was founded in 1946, and it has spent 80 years documenting the reality of women's lives around the world. This session, its theme was supposed to be women's access to justice. And on the very first day, it could not agree on what a woman is. The UN's own special rapporteur on violence against women said plainly from the floor, you cannot advocate for the rights of a group you cannot define. That is not a conservative talking point. That is from the UN's own expert on violence against women, speaking at the UN's own Women's Rights Commission. This is one of those moments where the United States stood completely alone. 37 countries voted against them, and then the room gave a standing ovation. 6 countries, including Saudi Arabia, couldn't bring themselves to vote either way. The work that we do every day, is in part because we believe that same-sex attracted people, gay men, lesbians, bisexual people exist. And so much of that is based on the concepts that we recognize that women exist. We believe you cannot protect what you cannot name. And we're going to keep saying this for as long as it needs to be said. But that vote, 37-1, tells you exactly how much work there is left to do. We are not done. We are not even close. So if this show matters to you, please subscribe. It is free to do on Substack. Please leave reviews and please share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Every share puts these conversations in front of people who aren't looking for them yet. Those are the exact to people that we need to reach. So as always, thank you for listening to Informed Dissent, and stay informed and ready to dissent.